Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever no shorty, and I apologise it's been a while since my last review. There's been some stuff going on where I've not had the time to really commit to reading and proper getting into something. I tried reading Hunt for the Skinwalkers, but we only had a handful of copies. Every single one was taken, and I never actually got to finish reading it. And that was what I was supposed to review yesterday. So today it is Kill Your Darlings, one I actually made sure I got a few spares off because I like the conceptual beat on this one, and Image are pushing it, so yeah, I'll give it a go. Now, I do genuinely like this comic book. It is a lot of stuff I do really enjoy, but I'm talking about the two things up front which I bounced off a little bit. Not totally ruined it for me, but start with an aspect of the art, because for the most part, I generally like the artwork. It does some really cool, interesting things with the settings changing, because it's based partly in the real world, partly in an imaginary fantasy world, and the use of colouring and even line work to a certain degree to show a differentiation between those two places is really, really cool. Also great characterizations both in the real world and in this fantasy world. Absolutely fantastically well done, great throughout, with one minor thing is the colouring. And I've got to be honest, colouring is one of those things that years ago, when I first started reviewing comic books, I didn't really put much basis into. It was just an understanding that things had to be coloured in a certain way, but the more you delve into what people can do with different colour palettes and even different grades and how they apply this kind of thing, can use it for lighting and shade and all that kind of thing, when it doesn't look great, it's a bit more noticeable. And this isn't saying it doesn't look fantastic, amazing all the time. It looks great a lot of the time. But there's a bit when it goes to the fantasy world, and the colour palette changes from a quite sedate, greyish, washed-out colouring from the real world to big, over-the-top, fully drenched, vibrant colours in this fantasy world. The thing is, it's all digitally computer colour from what I can see, and they had a chance to do something a bit cooler here, I think, because when we're in the real world, we see the child's drawings of this fantasy world that she then goes into, and they're fantastic, like, at a certain point when it gets to slightly horrific kind of things. The fact that horrific scenes drawn in crayon is like a really, really nice idea. Love it. Like, an actual artistic style and themes that have interested me for a while, and I've generally considered putting some effort into learning how to do it. But the colouring stays that same kind of overproduced digital colouring, and I think there was a chance to make it look a little bit grainier, a little bit different, to not just the colouring looking different, but the way the world itself could be different by the colouring. And I just can't help but feel it was a missed opportunity to do something a little bit bold, which wasn't taken. Now, the other criticism comes on story, because there is a whole bunch of really cool stuff happening here. There is stories of trauma and poverty, there is the power of imagination, there is friendship, relationships between mother and daughter, and some kind of subtle, not OTT world building, which I really, really did enjoy. But there's also a whole thing at the beginning of the comic book, which is set in the 17th century and involves a witch being burnt at the stake. I mean, mostly they were hanged, not burnt, but that's not really the big point. It's more than the fact that happened, and then I read the comic book, and I got to the end, and I was thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. I'm enjoying this. I like where it's going. There's some nice twists and turns. I like the relationship building up. I like the dialogue. The story is kind of cool. And then I went back to the front, just to flick through, because I kind of like going back and seeing, like, get a better read on artistry, get a better read on how the pages are laid out. And I was reminded that there was this thing that happened at the beginning with a witch being burnt at the stake, and I went, oh yeah, that's a thing that happened, like the first few pages. Never gets mentioned again, and only tangentially gets a reference, and it is such a tangent reference that I honestly didn't make it until I genuinely went back and looked at it again and thought, I suppose maybe you could say that this thing that happened in the final couple of pages might be a reference to it with the title Kill Your Darlings, but it feels flipped and reversed, and it made me get to the end of it and think, I usually am okay with not being 100% sure what's happening in a comic book. Not like because it's badly written, this is not a bullseye and shit kicker kind of situation, but I like the fact that not everything is laid down in front of me. I like the fact that there are themes and story ideas which are yet to be explored fully. It still needs to grab me, it needs to be interesting by the writing and the art, which it definitely does, but if I don't know everything, that's fine. In fact, I hate to be spoon-fed. But this, I got to the end, and I genuinely was like, but what is going on with that? I think if I'm right on the thing that's connected the two together, it could be a cool, interesting look at generational relationships, but I don't know if that's what it is, because there just generally wasn't enough there to show why it was given front and center kind of staging. Never gets referenced again, not in any way that gives any answers to the question, why is it there? Hopefully, if you read this, it will not spoil it for you. You can still enjoy the comic book and hopefully, like me, want to know what happens next, want to see more of these worlds and these characters, a couple of very specific ones who I do want to follow their stories. And I do hope we do get some more information on this. I mean, I think it'd be terrible to think that all we're going to get is a series of random vignettes of history and they're never going to be properly put together until the final issue. And then we're like, oh, I suppose it all makes sense now. I hope we are going to get the story put together a little bit more effectively as we're going forward, rather than just waiting and info dump at the end. We'll wait and see, though. One last thing before I go, Hunt for the Skinwalkers, stuff I did read. It looked kind of cool. The artwork wasn't my cup of tea. It was a little bit basic for me. It didn't really do much with the setting. And the story seemed to not really be going in interesting places. But the real reason I wasn't a huge fan of it was I've just recently read the entirety of The Department of Truth, and I feel like I've read a better version of that story with better artwork and better themes throughout. And unfortunately, because of that, I didn't really spend a lot of time going back and trying to read it before it all disappeared from the store. Hopefully, if whoever buys it from me gets more from it, that's absolutely fantastic. But for me, I'm just going to Department of Truth instead. That's it for me for now, though. I'll be back with more reviews later. Until then, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.